a Bitcoin. Yeah. Yes.
All right, we're back. Q, welcome.
What is up? It's great to be back after a couple weeks.
Yeah, man, great to have you back. I just want to draw attention to the chat real quick. We got Patrick trying to dunk on me in the chat, which is hilarious. Patrick says, "I don't like this guest who is bald." Lucky for you, Patrick. I'm not a guest. I'm the host. I'm here every day. I don't know what more I had to say except that. I thought it was funny that he called me a guest. We love you, Patrick. Buy some Bitcoin, man. What's happening, Q?
What is up, man? I am back for another segment of Bitcoin Adjacent Equities, and we're going to talk Riot Blockchain, continuing on with some of these public mining companies. Last time we chatted, we talked about HUT. So we're coming across the border to an American-based company this time.
It's exciting. So what, like if you had to compare Riot to HUT 8, what are some of the differences in Bitcoin terms that stand out from you, just like from the offset?
I'd say the most notable one is the hash rate. Riot's hash rate as of right now is roughly 3 times that of HUT's. So that just, in my opinion, upgrades them, makes them a stronger miner. I do want to preface and say Riot Blockchain does not have the highest hash rate of any publicly traded company. It just has a higher hash rate than the one we previously discussed. A couple other things that I do want to bring note is Riot has been very aggressively expanding, as have almost every single US based company in the mining sector, especially since the China mining ban. Riot had, over the course of the last 18 months, they have bought something to the tune of over 50,000 ant miners from Bitmain. And those purchases started back in August of 2020 and really ramped up last year when they purchased 42,000 of them after China banned mining.
So they purchase options as well. There's like future projections on how many miners they're going to be buying throughout this year, right?
Yes. And then they have officially now closed on owning the Whinstone data center in Texas. And this is one of the most interesting things to me. By buying this data center in Texas, that alone made them have the largest Bitcoin mining facility in the US. It had 750 megawatts of power, and they have now additionally are ramping that up by 33%. And they're going to take the largest Bitcoin mining facility in the country and make it 33% larger. And now it's going to have a 1,000 megawatt capacity for that center. So they are really looking to expand and have a footprint and establish themselves as the American miners, if you will.
That's wild. So is there, I don't know if you mentioned this already, is there an American miner now who has a greater hash rate?
I would say Marathon has a higher hash rate than them. And before I misspeak, I believe Core Scientific is also considered an American-based miner, and they have a higher hash rate than both Marathon and Riot. So that just helps paint a picture a little bit. I do want to also, on a side note, they have already increased their forecast. Riot has for this year, 2022, where they were originally expected to have an 8.5 hash rate. They are now upping that forecast to about 9, these are significant numbers to really help paint a picture. You're looking at a hash rate of 8.5 to 9 would cover over 5%, just about the entire hash rate of the Bitcoin network. That is a significant portion of the entire Bitcoin network. So it is worth paying attention to and seeing how companies that have, I'd say, a couple of percent of the hash rate, how they're expanding, where they're expanding to, and what their efforts are, because these are not sort of a flash in the pan little thing. I think everyone who's paying attention to this saw last year how great and how rewarding owning mining stocks was. I think a lot of that was based on future forecasts. I think specifically companies like Marathon, Riot, and Hut, which really hold a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, that Bitcoin is being undervalued both by the market and by investors. We've now had a whole year where Bitcoin is above $25,000 at minimum. And as a result, I think one of the best things that's going to happen to the Bitcoin network is all of these companies will increase in value. As they increase in value, they will have more access to fiat dollars to go out and continue to expand. And as they continue to expand their footprint, it will only continue to push the hash rate higher. And as our deep dive team like to remind everyone, and Dylan Leclerc, as the hash rate goes up, so too will the Bitcoin price. So these are all net positives for the long run of Bitcoin.
You love to see it. So what are some of the near term price adjustments you're looking at for today?
Totally. Well, let me go ahead and share this chart for you. And let's dive in. So as we see here, it's not been a pretty year. We've pretty much taken a high from last year, steady decline. We have a nice downtrend going. As you like to tease me, almost every stock we talk about has been in this downtrend. These downtrends, though, these peaks and valleys do correlate back to the price of Bitcoin. An unfortunate thing is that while Bitcoin had made a new all-time high back in November, none of these stocks that we've really been looking at did make a new all-time high. However, we're seeing short-term highs, and that is a promising thing. It looks like we are still building out bases for bigger type of investments. However, in the meantime, we'll dive deeper into this chart and really look at where we can expect some support and resistance. And we'll look for support because our expectations are we're bottoming out. I would say the first level of support will obviously be the low from last week or 2 weeks ago now, right around $21 a share, which just so happens to coincide with where we went as low as today. So this goes to show you that this is a very viable level. It was tested just today as well. And we'll look to see how Riot continues to react at this level. I would say the next level of support below us we have is this low from May, about 2050, 2060 a share. And then just because whole numbers do the same thing to everyone, it makes numbers look pretty and everyone pays attention to them. About $20 a share will also be an area of support. So we're really playing right now in about a 15% range, which is significant. That's a lot of downside still to go. However, at the same time, my expectation is we should not be breaking below these levels, especially the $20 a share, with Bitcoin's price expected to move up with the expansion efforts that Riot has, with how much Bitcoin they hold on their balance sheet. My expectation is we will see a bottom, if we have not already, at one of these next two price levels. Should that not be the case, we were going to continue to drop potentially all the way down to about $16 a share, which coincides with this low that we had back in January of 21. So we could come to a place where we test out a low from almost a year ago. However, I'd say it's more likely that we're going to be looking at that, staying in that $20 a share range. And so long as we do, our expectations should be that upside is on its way. If we break below 20, there's going to be a lot more downside coming.
So what do you think the strategy, if you have to hold Riot and it's dropping like this? I mean, are you shorting it? Do you ever short these stocks? What do you advise people to do exactly?
So I don't short. I'm much more of a believer of there's always something going up. That said, the markets can be tough when the markets are going down. So I would say there were three main periods where I was fully out of the market. It was right around May, after the market had really buckled, and it coincides with this nice sharp sell-off. Back in September, right before the most recent leg up, there was another hard sell-off then. And then most recently, just before the new year, I was actually dumping a lot of stocks with the expectation that the market would turn sour. We're now seeing the market hit new all-time highs, and we're slowly starting to get back in there. My investment strategy is rooted a lot around growth investing. I read the book How to Invest in Stocks by Bill O'Neill when I was in college, and just the things he said made sense. And one of my favorite like little math tidbits was you really should be taking profits on a stock after it gains 25%. People love to be like, oh, I bought this stock when it was $1 a share. Now it's 50. Like, no. Because when a stock raises 25%, anywhere from 20 to 25%, it usually takes a break. It likes to cool down. A lot of people in New York are going to cash in their profits because 25% on $500 million is a lot of money. So I tend to sell after 20 to 25%. Now let's do a little thought exercise. If you have $1,000 invested and you take 25% profit, now you have $1,250. If you reinvest that fully and then do it again where you sell it all at about a 25% profit, you're looking at about $1,600, a little bit more. You do it a third time, fully invest, and then you cash out at 25%, you're just a hair under $2,000. So with 3 different iterations of only a 75% increase in the stock, you actually gained 100%. So it's a really interesting way of creating arbitrage by compounding your gains. And while you actually limit your market exposure so that you can come in very, very short, ride the wave up. Once you hit your profit mark, you exit, and then you sort of sit and wait for the next base to really build. One of the things that we don't talk about a lot on this segment, and it's due more so to the fact that they haven't really been fully formed in these type of equities yet, are buying stocks on a perfect base. Things like a cup with handle, double bottom, ascending base. Those are different chart patterns that we will dive into when they appear on the chart. As of right now, I would argue that we're looking at a cup formation being formed, but we're still in the middle of it, which could end up resulting in a buckle. We could undercut these lows, and all of a sudden you're looking at a double bottom. When we get to a point where there is an actual chart pattern to show, we'll discuss and break that down deeper. In the meantime, by analyzing and understanding these different areas of support and resistance, we're able to help set our expectations on, is this actually the right side of the cup being built, or are we still in sort of no man's land waiting for the stock to decide what direction it goes up?
Yeah, thanks for showing us the charts, Q, and what's happening. How do you make the decision between all these not the equities at large, but just between the mining companies? Like if you're gonna, like, to me the decision is you're gonna buy Bitcoin. Okay, so you buy the Bitcoin. You can't buy Bitcoin. Okay, so you look for a portfolio of tech stocks or mining stocks. Do you diversify at that point? Is there a clear winner? How do you make decisions about that? What's your strategy?
So I like to follow, again, a lot of the growth investing strategies. So one of the things that kind of breaks the mold, and a lot of people who are listening may not actually agree with this or follow this. I'm not a big fan of like, I need to be hyper diversified. However, I do diversify. That said, I'm actually looking for, oh, here's the post. I literally have the posted still of like when I started the account. So I don't think it'll show up, but essentially I wrote, and with the account that has less than $5,000 in it, I'm only in 2 stocks. Any account with 5,000 to 20,000, I'm only in up to 3 stocks. And any account from 20,000 to $100,000, I at most will only have 5 stocks. That's not typical. Usually most people are like, you only should have 10% of your portfolio in one stock. Now, what I like to do based on those numbers is, say we have a $50,000 portfolio. So I'm going to put 5 different stocks. I'll typically pick 3 to 4 sectors. And if, for example, Bitcoin in general is a sector in my portfolio. So I have exposure to exchanges between Square and Coinbase. I also have exposure to mining stocks. Full disclosure, I own a significant portion of Core Scientific. I do not own Riot. I do not own any Marathon at this moment. I have in the past, but Core Scientific is my largest holding. A lot of that. I'll post a link to the book after the segment once I stop my little tangent. I see your guys's question in the comments box. But to answer your question, there is a little bit of diversification. And what I tend to do is, like, say I want to start a new position in Bitcoin mining. So I'll pick 3 to 5 of the best Bitcoin mining stocks. I'll start watching their chart patterns. I'll see which one looks with the most upside, i.e. has the least amount of resistance. We didn't get a chance yet to look at Riot's resistance. We've only looked at 3 levels of support. I will tell you this right now. There are twice as many levels of resistance above the current price of Riot than there are for support below it. So it tells me we have a lot of overhead sells coming up. We'll get to a certain price point and we'll be turned away because people who bought at this high price point will be like, oh, I can actually get out of break even. Nice, let's go. When in reality, if everyone didn't think like that and everyone was like, the price is going up, it should keep going up, hold, you will break these price levels. And those people who are just trying to get out break even could actually have held for a nice little gain. They won't. Human psychology does not work like that. It happens in everything from stocks, Bitcoin, down to commodities. And so once you have established, though, this sector that you want to go into and you find a few stocks, say now we have 2 or 3 different stocks that are all sort of willing and able or look viable options, we'll split between these stocks, and whatever works, whatever is responding well based on our thesis. Our thesis is that these 3 stocks are going to go up. Well, only 2 of them went up and 1 started going down. We get rid of the one that went down, and all of that money that was invested in that one starts getting split between the other 2. And if in these other 2, one of them also isn't working, we take that money out, and now we're all in on the one that's working, on the stock that's going up, because that's the big winner in our sector. There's typically 1 to 2 winners in the sector. Everything else is sort of noise. You can get some wins there, but what you really want to do is find those leaders so you can keep hitting 25% gains.
And you believe, 25% gains isn't going to outperform Bitcoin, though. So why should someone invest in them at all?
Well, the typical window to get these 25% gains can range from, there's another rule behind this, but it can typically range from 4 weeks to about 24 weeks. So a month to 6 months. If you're getting these 24% gains inside of 3 to 4 months at a time, again, if you only get 3 of them in a year, you've doubled your investment. So all of a sudden, yes, Bitcoin over the last few years has outperformed 100% gain in lifetime. However, there will come a point, hopefully in the near future, where that volatility is going to get numbed down and we're going to slow down those gains. Whatever happens to the stock market remains to be seen, but while it still exists in the capacity that it does, these are different ways to almost create, I like to call it fake arbitrage. Everyone's always chasing arbitrage in the financial industry, but this is how you've essentially created 25% of a gain without actually having that 4th stock.
Nice. So the highest diversity of market outcomes kind of there. You've got the best of both worlds. It's not really a fail safe. Like you're not bearish on Bitcoin. You're just kind of doubling down on your bullishness somehow.
Yeah, again, the deep dive guys did a really excellent job breaking this down in their year-end review. So if anyone's not subscribed to it, I highly recommend. I believe we have a link in our description, but in the year-end review, they really broke it down very well, where they highlighted a lot of different Bitcoin equities, specifically mining stocks, and they really explained. They showed, hey, if you bought mining stocks at the top of 2021 versus Bitcoin, mining stocks were actually what you wanted to own in 2021, not the actual, not Bitcoin, as far as what percentage return you got by year end. That said, that's not necessarily going to continue into the future. I think a lot of it, as I mentioned before, was because the markets just didn't understand how to value Bitcoin on the balance sheet. The market didn't understand what a hash rate is in those type of competitions. I think we're going to see the market correct itself this year, and you're going to see the real mining leaders actually become the leaders reflected in the stock market. That said, there are different ways to be exposed to Bitcoin. Ultimately, the best exposure to Bitcoin is owning Bitcoin. However, for a lot of people, like starting your own at-home mining rig, even with, I believe when I was looking it up, BitDeer, I think the cheapest offering they have is something to the tune of like $1,500, which is a lot of money. Not everyone necessarily has $1,500 to set up their own at-home mining rig. With $10, $5, $1, you can go and buy Bitcoin. But also with a lot of the things that we're seeing now with Robinhood and Square starting to allow fractional shares being purchased, on top of the fact that Bitcoin equities aren't really that expensive as far as like a share price goes. MicroStrategy is an exception to that. But we're talking Riot right now, and it's trading at $23 a share. Like that's how much Bitcoin I buy a day. I can buy a share of Riot as well now. So I think that access to being able to like sort of have a share of a company that's mining Bitcoin versus like, hey, I may not necessarily be able to afford setting up the computer. I don't have the capacity or bandwidth to necessarily have a whole mining rig at home. You're still able to have some sort of exposure, at least financially, to reap the reward. If you believe, as we do, that Bitcoin mining has a fundamental place in the future of energy consumption and use.
So you're kind of just getting prepared for a parabolic move in the mining industry as a whole, not necessarily. Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, despite the moves, what happens with the hash rate, you're just expecting the whole industry to take off and for those stocks to lift off with Bitcoin, like we saw in 2017. And you just want to kind of have everything set for that.
In a sense, yeah. I would say for those paying attention who like really pay attention to stocks the way I do, I would say the most important number that I pay attention to is not actually the price, but the volume being traded. But there's no like real volume necessarily. There are actually so many different volume components within analyzing Bitcoin, technically speaking, where you can have how many coins are on exchanges, how many coins are moving off of exchanges. You have how many what's the ratio that Willy Woo and Will Clement came up with? Like who, like long-term holders who all have held 75, like there are so many different technical analysis tools that kind of measure volume. I personally believe that hash rate has a better indicator of volume than anything else. And if you're talking about mining companies where in essence, all they're doing is contributing to the hash rate, how much more are they increasing the hash rate of the Bitcoin network? I had this thought while I was traveling over the weekend and sort of doing more reading and on my own. And I thought to myself, it's funny how we're talking about hash rate for Riot being under 10. And I believe Marathons is over 20 and Core Scientific is even higher than that. And those are significant, but we have others that are in the single digits still to this day. And I believe, and don't quote me, I'm going to try to Google this live, current hash rate of Bitcoin should be around 160. Correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, please. But so 172 it is right now. So we're off of the all-time highs at 181, but there's a world where you add a zero to this, and that's what the normal hash rate will look like. You have to keep in mind, like we're still not in, excuse me, we still haven't seen hyper Bitcoinization. Like we only have one country that views Bitcoin as legal tender. Like what happens when a global power starts accepting Bitcoin? What happens when Amazon says you can start buying or selling, transacting with Bitcoin on our platform? What happens when Airbnb says, hey, you want to rent this property, you can pay for it in Bitcoin if you want? Tesla's already done it. Tesla was the test. They may have taken it away, but they validated it by doing that. And I know you and I have had that conversation too about like what really did Silk Road do to the Bitcoin community? It validated it as a medium of exchange. We may not necessarily be there yet. And I fully support the notion that we need to get to store of value first and foremost, establish that before we go to the next iteration. But while we're getting there, there are going to be other things that help propel us to that point. I believe the hash rate continuing to grow is one of those things. And how do we monetize on the hash rate growing? By owning Bitcoin and by owning a component of what is helping to increase those hash rates, i.e. mining companies.
So we've got Funky Fresh in the chat, who is like our resident troll, and he's asking if it's against our rules to buy shitcoins and have the major gains shift those gains into Bitcoin. I would say absolutely, but I'm kind of curious what you say. But I also wouldn't recommend buying equities or stocks at all. So I'm curious what you say to that, Q. Like, how do you feel about people noticing a surge in ETH or something like that, and then swapping those gains over to Bitcoin?
I'm gonna say something that like Alex might try to strangle me when he sees me on Wednesday. I have no problem taking that approach, Funky. Like, to be completely honest, that's the way to do it. And I will tell you what I do. And we'll walk through the numbers of it and you'll kind of understand why in my head it makes sense. Say you buy whatever shit coin of the week it is, you bought $100 worth. Tomorrow it doubled. I'm not selling all of that. I'm going to sell 10% of that. My cost basis was $100. It has doubled, so it's now worth $200, and I've sold 10% of that. So I've sold $20 worth straight to Bitcoin. Just doubled again. Now it's worth $400. I'm going to sell another 10%. Oh, actually, no, it's not worth $100. It's worth $360. $360, I'm going to sell another 10%. So now all of a sudden I've covered $56 of my original cost basis based on selling 10% on each double. What happens when it doubles that final time now? So from 360, you sold 36, that's $324. You're at $648. You just sold another $64. Now all of a sudden you've covered your cost basis. You still have another $500 in this shit coin. If you so please, like, go nuts. Personally, I have a rule of 5 doubles, I'm out. And I do on every single iteration.
Hold on. You made a rule for what are you investing in that's doubling, that you're counting on doubling 5 times in a row? And isn't the risk factor here through the roof? Like, aren't you far better off just buying Bitcoin and holding it?
Absolutely. However, you negate your risk factor by by your goal being to take out your cost basis from your initial investment. So I want to just cover my $100. That $100 was going to go into Bitcoin regardless. But if I can get that $100 to outpace Bitcoin over a short stretch of time, and then at the same time flip it back into Bitcoin, it's in theory, a better investment. That said, I don't do more than $100 in a shitcoin. I never have. I've also never.
But how many shitcoins would you throw $100 on? Are you trying to game up? Because that's the thing. Which one do you pick? They're all garbage.
If I can't count it on one hand, then I have too many.
Okay, that's an interesting rule.
There's money to be had. I think for those of us who pay attention to Bitcoin as closely as we do, there are a lot of little tidbits that we can use as far as being able to attempt to capitalize on what I still believe to be a bubble as far as the entire shitcoin industry. And that bubble will pop. Like, not every single one of these shitcoins will survive. Some will. It is inevitable. Some will outlast others. And what those are, I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would have bought Bitcoin in 2011 and I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be on God knows what. But that said, I'm willing to, in the same vein of I'm going to buy $25 Bitcoin a day, I'm willing to, if I go down a rabbit hole, I like the technology and I believe that there is something to do with a price correlation with Bitcoin and Bitcoin's next leg up is coming. I do try to take my $25 buys and I'll put them elsewhere.
Interesting. I just want to reiterate for people in the chat. This is, here at Bitcoin Magazine, we're trying to achieve hyper Bitcoinization, and not everyone has the same idea about how to get there. So it's definitely worth listening to other people's strategies and takes. I've been there. I used to do that with cryptocurrencies a long time ago. I found it's a lot less time and effort and risk to simply buy and hold Bitcoin, and that gets me further, um, more measurable progress faster in the direction that I want to go, rather than researching these. Because it seems to me that you would be a little bit short on time if you're having to research all of these stocks and cryptos. So how do you balance that, Q, as a Bitcoiner, and how do you like, where are the checks and balances for you? I know you have pretty strict rules, like investment rules you follow, but I mean, what if you just get too far in the weeds? Because that's, as some people in the chat are pointing out, that these can be highly distraction. This shitcoin casino, it can really lead people astray, I think.
I will say this before I answer your question. I do want to comment on something Funky Fresh followed up and said. I don't want you to mistake what I'm saying when you say, great to hear how the whole crypto ecosystem can help Bitcoin thrive. It is the other way around. The entire that shitcoin crypto market only exists because of Bitcoin. That market excels and accelerates because of Bitcoin. It it is reliant more on Bitcoin than Bitcoin is reliant on it. So you have to flip that thought process. And as far as like, getting lost in the weeds and going down the rabbit hole, um, it I will, we always learn more from our mistakes than our successes. And I made a mistake, I'd say, in the end of 2020, top of 2021, where I went down a very deep rabbit hole and spun myself out to a point where there were two different coins. I don't even feel like I don't really want to share which coins they were, because to be completely honest, they've gone up so much because I spun myself out. But like I went back and I took the time to understand, like, why did I think that this technology worked? Why did I think this had merit and a use case? And B, where were my mistakes as far as expectation setting and overall future forecasting? I've started to get to a point where if if the description of technology spins me out and leaves me more confused, i.e., if I read the white paper and I know less about this than the random article I read before the white paper, we have an issue. I think that is just me personally talking. I I think it took me 2 years before I actually went and opened the Bitcoin white paper and read it myself. And I remember at that point reading the Bitcoin white paper thinking, oh, yeah, no, I already knew that. I knew, okay. And I think having that education behind it, having the color commentary before really helped me. I've done that with other technologies since. I'm not going to name names. This is a Bitcoin show. We're going to focus on Bitcoin, but there were a couple of very large tokens that I own even now where I had a very similar experience when I read their white papers. And then there was one that maybe rhymes with nipple that the white paper just never made sense to me, but I was like, I can make money on this. And I didn't make money on this. And literally the second I sold it, it quadrupled in price. So you're absolutely right. There's risk and reward, but to be honest, there's more risk in not being in than being in right now.
So let me ask you this. And we're Mark Goodwin is here now to bear witness to this. I don't know if we want to bring Mark into Bitcoin Adjacent Equities.
Yes, do it.
Because then me and him can gang up on you because we share a similar mindset, and you can have all the shit corners in the chat on your side, and then I get Mark Goodwin.
I'm never gonna live this down, am I?
No, dude, you will. I'm interested in this though because I have to kind of eschew that mindset to stay true to my own. Bitcoin maximalism is a bit toxic, and it does require kind of like distancing myself from the noise, right? So I don't keep tabs on what's happening in crypto land, but it's still curious to me what other people like experience Bitcoin, how they experience Bitcoin, and what you think. So my question to you, Q, is: are there? What does your hat say? I can't read it.
Shitcoin minimalist. I'm not a Bitcoin
That's
maxi, but
beautiful.
shitcoin minimalist.
I couldn't even read it. That's awesome.
This is my
So
favorite hat.
my question to you is: is there a competing marketplace between Bitcoin and crypto, or do you understand these to be separate asset classes? There will never be another Bitcoin. There will never be something that can bootstrap its way into Bitcoin, or option C or D.
I will say this. All right, I'm just gonna show my cards. I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maxi because I don't adhere to any sort of maximalist philosophy, regardless of like anything. It doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be fiat. It doesn't have to be finance. Like I don't believe in an all or nothing approach because inevitably everything ends. People were saying the exact same things that some Bitcoin maxis say about Bitcoin, about the US dollar before we got off the gold standard and then right after we got the gold standard. Um, I think inevitably the entire crypto market is not going to necessarily die out and go away, nor do I think Bitcoin dies out and goes away. I do agree that these are two separate ecosystems that rely on one another. However, as we make a lot of mention on this show, as many people are fully aware, like there are so many different new shitcoin projects that pop up and down every single day. And I was just reading a comment. I want to make sure I give credit to
Jair's about to unsubscribe, dude. He's so pissed that we talked about Bitcoin maximalism. All right, see you, Jair. Not for the faint of heart. This discussion, guys. This meeting of the minds between Bitcoin and what do you call yourself, Q? What do you call your philosophy?
shitcoin minimalist.
Okay, okay. And between Bitcoin maxi and shitcoin minimalist. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, by the way. I don't even call myself a Bitcoiner. I hold Bitcoin.
To
That's it.
Jair's point, like it is so valid that there is a level of like if I try to approach my non-Bitcoin friends with like let's discuss Bitcoin. Like I was in a cabin up in the Rockies for the last 2 weeks with one of my best friends, and we talked a lot about Bitcoin, about why I believe in it, why I think it has merit, what its use cases are today, what its use cases can be in the future, and then his questions and concerns about it. Like, have I finished orange pilling him? No, he still doesn't own Bitcoin. However, like if I come at it from the lens of your dollars have no value, like Bitcoin is the end all be all, like I sound like a crazy person. Like let's just be honest. And we've had this discussion once before where, Jerome Powell, nobody in the US government. I don't give a damn how many senators are passing legislation. Nobody in the US government can or ever will come out and say the dollar is dead by Bitcoin. Why? Because they run the fucking printers, excuse my language. So like they're so incentivized to not let Bitcoin succeed. Elon Musk is incentivized to let fiat and the dollar standard reign supreme so that his billions of dollars still hold value and merit. So I just got excited seeing Mark on the screen. Sorry.
What's up, Mark Goodwin?
Keep going. No, this is great. Don't stop the signal.
So all of that being said, like, do I still hold some dollar? Yeah, I need to pay for gas. I want to pay for dinner from time to time, and I don't want to have to like go through frankly, the hoops of paying the fees to buy Bitcoin and then paying the fees to get my fiat back. I'm not a big believer in pay me in Bitcoin. I'm a much bigger believer in let me just set up a recurring buy and just like consistently do that. And then like never touch my Bitcoin rather than let me only have Bitcoin and then minimalize what I buy. I find for myself, at least in my spending habits, it's a lot easier for me to just say, I have to spend this money on Bitcoin. And it's just part of my expenses, as is rent and my power bill.
All right, Mark, to clue you in, I don't know how much of this you heard, but we were hoping you could weigh in on this. So we've got Q has outed himself as a shitcoin minimalist.
I love that hat.
Which is like a new categorization that I'd never considered. And people in the chat are actually siding with Q. We've got a lot more, I would say, crypto agnostic, or people that believe that Bitcoin is in a competing marketplace, like is on the same asset, is in the same asset class as other cryptocurrencies, which would kind of be at odds with what I believe, and I think also at odds with what you believe. But you tell us. I mean, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, there's I'll give a hat tip to Hodel Magoo of Twitter Spaces fame, where he talks about just that the total addressable market of Bitcoin being, in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, whereas a lot of these other platforms and things are kind of more like social networks, and their total addressable market is in, maybe in the, maybe $1 trillion or something, just because of inflation being insane, but very like, it's just not really doing the same thing. It's like comparing like gold to like Twitter stock. That's kind of how I see it. Like, I think I'm with you, Alex, where I think they are separate classes of things. I mean, Bitcoin is all of the things it says it is. It's a scarce bearer asset that you can actually own and hold. And all these other networks are permissioned or centralized. And so you don't actually really hold that immutable thing that you think that you do. And I think that does set Bitcoin apart.
Yo, my fellow Bitcoin lovers, have I got something specifically curated for you. The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium markets intelligence newsletter. This isn't some pay group selling buy and sell signals. No, this is a premium Bitcoin analysis led by Dylan LeClaire and his team of analysts. They break down in an easily digestible way what is happening on chain, in the derivatives markets, and in the greater macro backdrop context for Bitcoin. This newsletter turns volatility into a joke. So hit up members.bitcoinmagazine.com and use promo code podcast for 30% off the deep dive. That's members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code podcast for 30% off. Divorce your paid group and learn why Bitcoin is the ultimate asset by Dylan and his team.
So let's break that apart then. So if you think Bitcoin is set apart and you're looking for an investment, a store of value, or you're here for sovereign, ungovernable wealth, Bitcoin is clearly far and away the best asset, and probably the only asset you should hold, right? Why would you diversify if you know that to be true? So to my mind, like, my question for Q is, do you think that is not the case, or do you think that it's possible for another coin to bootstrap itself into existence and to somehow achieve what Bitcoin is achieving without proof of work?
Is that for Q?
Yeah, for anyone really.
I mean, I kind of, I guess my thought process is not dissimilar to what Mark is saying. However, I kind of challenge you a little bit where you say it's like Bitcoin and all the shitcoiners are like gold and the other company that you made mention, where yes, they're different asset classes. However, these are asset classes that do relate to one another, regardless of what we believe. Like, the general market and people's psychology leads it to have those type of characteristics. And I'd almost argue and say, like, while they are separate companies, entities, if you will, like, they are related, almost in the vein of like hotel and airline stocks. Like, if airline stocks are going down and people aren't traveling, like, no one's going to go to a hotel and stay at a hotel. And you see both of those not necessarily trade one-to-one in relation, but there is this level of connection where as one goes down, the other gets related into, regardless of, hey, you know what? All of our hotels are driving distance from major metropolitan cities. Doesn't fucking matter, because New York here's people aren't traveling, people aren't getting on planes. We're not also going to hotels. So there's that level of human psychology that I think sometimes gets lost in the fray, that I think when it comes to investing, when it comes to money, that has to also be thought of.
I would counter with those. That's only true if you denominate in fiat terms. On Bitcoin's terms, these crypto assets have no bearing. They have no influence on the Bitcoin market at all. They don't affect its fundamental protocol or prices, really.
But
Whereas
the
Bitcoin,
what is the Bitcoin price in?
yeah,
What?
but
It's not in Satoshis. It's not in it's not Bitcoin. We still live in a fiat denominated world. As much as we want that to change, these are the systems in place right now.
yeah, no, I agree with that. In that, I think when you look at, like a, crypto watch or something, and you see everything, and you see Bitcoin go down, it's like everything moves with Bitcoin. Like I don't disagree with that. That's definitely true. And it's very rare when you see anything move positively away from like uncorrelated to Bitcoin. Like that's pretty rare when you see that. And that does kind of pop up. Like if you just see, general red, and then you just see some random thing, 43 down or whatever, that's like up 5%. You're like, what the hell's going on? But I would say that it's generally, it's kind of a false equivalency. Like I think that if you look at historically, like everyone, I don't know, like Raoul Paul likes to talk about this, with his like Metcalfe's law thing, where he's like, Ethereum has more users and more, more wallet addresses, and therefore the network effects are going to, but they keep missing this like fundamental point at the bottom, that if you're building on top of, an unstable governance or a significant pre-mine that centralizes governance later, it's like comparing gold to a fiat, where there is a central bank, there is central planning. And so the immutability and the soundness of Bitcoin is really not represented anywhere else in the grand cryptocurrency sphere. And while I don't think altcoins are going away anytime soon in terms of people and marketing teams scheming and doing things, I mean, if you look at what were the top crypto alternatives in 2014, 2015, 2016, and then you look at it now, there's very few that have stayed even in the top 10 or 20. It's like all these, Vitalik just did a year-end post, and he brought up some things that he was kind of, letting people make fun of him for. And all the coins that he mentioned in his his posts from years ago, like, were coins that don't, like, even, Ripple was the only one that even really exists in any meaningful way. So I think it's a little bit of a false equivalency, but Q, I do agree that there is, the way the market moves, it is fiat denominated for now. And I argue that won't change for a while, but it will change. But I think dollar denominated Bitcoin is not going away for a while. But yeah, the market moves with Bitcoin for sure.
But on a personal level, how do you denominate your Bitcoin, Mark?
Oh, definitely. It's I have my Bitcoin in, I have a few different layers of my Bitcoin. And it is definitely Bitcoin denominated for sure.
I got you. Let's do a giveaway while we're talking here. Let's give people some Bitcoin and lead them to the path of light and good, in case we didn't explain anything well. So we'll have a QR code on screen, and a code pop up that you guys can compete to try to win some sats real quick while we keep talking. Q, what's your rebuttal? What's your response? What do you think about?
I kind of want to. I agree with what Mark says, as far as like, for right now, the time being, like, this is the situation. I do believe that inevitably we will see a balancing act over the years. Whatever the second rated cryptocurrency has essentially changed over the last 10 years. There was that image that went viral over Twitter that I'm sure all of us retweeted, that Mark was referencing. That said, I want to put my tinfoil hat on, and if this is too extreme, just pull the mic, Chris. You can mute me. We'll have a talk about how inappropriate this was. But I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on now, because I want to do a thought experiment with both of you.
Okay.
where we talk about like, right now we are in the fiat standard. At some point in the future, we hope to see that change. Mark wrote one of the best articles on Bitcoin Magazine talking about the petrodollar. And ultimately, okay, please respect that this is just my viewpoint and my perspective on things. In the 90s, Saddam Hussein paired with Russia and Europe to introduce the euro dollar. Fast forward 5-6 years later, we are in war with Iraq for a multitude of reasons. I quantify that as being a leading reason and leading cause as to why we wanted to stop Iraq's expansion as far as oil and petro dominance goes. What is to say that whatever entity, say Bukele, turns around and says, like, the Bitcoin standard is the global standard. They convince all of Latin America. We have Latin America, Eastern Europe, Africa. All of a sudden, you start to have a majority of the world on a Bitcoin standard than a fiat standard. What is that response like to those countries that are what is the response from those countries that are on the fiat standard that have the most to lose? How do we convince them that they're not losing as much as they think? Because ultimately, that's where their heads will go. They will think the trillions of dollars that we have are worthless because there aren't enough Bitcoin out there. I can't exchange all of this for Bitcoin. And at the same time, I now lose my, if you will, my voting power, my influence in the world, because I no longer have dollar supremacy.
So I feel like you're asking how will Bitcoin become the world reserve currency, or how are we supposed to get to a Bitcoin standard as a currency? Mm-hmm. I'm not even advocating for that. That's above my pay grade. I believe that Bitcoin is the strongest form of property and is the only thing that you own that is not subject to governance or confiscation by governments or by authorities or small groups of VCs in the case of all the shitcoins. And so that's where I'm coming from. I want to see the world get on a Bitcoin as property standard, Bitcoin as a sound sovereign wealth fund standard. What happens with Bitcoin as a currency, I think that the world reserve currencies are going to fall to just a few, and you'll see them switch to something like the dollar, which is arguably the strongest among those. And then you'll probably see Bitcoin gobble that up as well as it becomes more sophisticated and things like the Lightning Network scale. But what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, that is sort of what Q mentioned, the article that I wrote. That is sort of kind of what I think will play out, is that, and we're seeing it, almost like 95% of all volume across the greater crypto market. So to give some points to Q's point earlier, but definitely with Bitcoin, the majority trading pairs are in US dollar denominated stable coins generally. And we've seen the stable coin market explode recently in the last couple of years, and definitely in the last year and in the last 6 months. I think something like it's like almost like 2% of like the addressable total money supply for circulating dollars. Like stable coins represents that, which is a ton. And so there is a meaningful implication with that, which is that it gives power to the Federal Reserve and the US dollar governance system to have more people using dollar denominated assets. It gives them more place to like shovel inflationary effects into. And I don't think that they're going to give up that power quickly, nor do I think that the world is really ready to be on the Bitcoin standard that quickly. There are so many businesses that their accounting and their books and everything is all denominated in dollars. And I don't think that can just switch overnight. I think it's a bit of a naive stance to think that it would, and that wouldn't be like a potentially dangerous thing. I'm not pro dollar in terms of like, I'm pretty anti-government in a lot of ways. I'm sure you guys know. But just the reality I'm with you, Alex. I think it's going to reduce down to like a couple currencies. And I'm not even bullish on the euro at all. Like I'm really not. I think it's going to be the dollar and then the yuan. And I think Tether is going to play a really interesting role in both of those currencies, because I think China is going through a bit of a credit crisis right now. We're seeing Evergrande, actually the Piper's coming to roost right now. And a lot of the people that use Tether are, Chinese nationalists trying to get liquidity out of China. Maybe controversial, but I don't think so. I think it's just true. Yeah, I don't see that like ending anytime soon. I think this decade will be dominated by Bitcoin predominantly. Like, I don't think there's any reason to keep your wealth in anything but Bitcoin. I really truly think that. Maybe real estate, maybe energy production, but otherwise Bitcoin. And I think we'll still use dollar denominated accounting and booking and maybe some purchasing power, but it will mostly be losing value to Bitcoin, as we've seen over the last 13 years now. Happy birthday, Bitcoin. And I don't think that's gonna change. It's just gonna focus. So the first country we see it isn't dollarized, El Salvador is incredible, and it really, the shot heard around the world, but they don't have a central bank. There's rumors that they are going to start a central bank and have a digital cologne again. That's kind of been talked about. But once we see the first country that has a central bank, be it like Turkey or any of these other countries that have been kicked around, that's when we'll see the game theory of the fiat death and Bitcoinization kind of play out.
To be clear, I mean, I'm with you, Mark. I'm pretty like ANCAP in sentiment, but I also don't want the US dollar to collapse. I think that would be chaos. Like, I think that would be havoc for a lot of people that don't know how to defend themselves. I think that would be, like an Armageddon of sorts for a lot of people around the world. That being said, I do think more and more people are going to adopt Bitcoin, and it's going to become their personal Bitcoin standard. I mean, it is my unit of account. It is my currency. If I chose to make, a large purchase, I'm sure that I would denominate it in the opportunity costs of the Bitcoin foregone. So, I mean, what do you say to that, Q? Does that make sense where we're coming from?
I totally agree. And the one thing I was thinking about when you said like inevitably a few fiat currencies will survive, I agree. The dollar, in the same way that we like to say there's too much tied into the Bitcoin network right now, like it cannot fail as a result. Like the dollar ultimately cannot fail because there's just too much tied to the dollar right now, and how we untangle that is Marvel nerd. It's kind of like that scene in Avengers, spoilers also, Avengers Infinity War, where like the girl who was kicked off of Black Panther like looks at the Hulk and Iron Man and is like, wait, why did you guys like create Vision like this and intertwine everything rather than like systematically add everything in order? Like, unfortunately, we intertwined everything to the dollar. So this unwinding of it is going to be very painful, take a very long time, be very expensive. No, I don't think the dollar ends. I do think we transact in it in some capacity. I disagree in the sense that I have a hard time believing that the entire world is going to be dollar denominated at a point where we are transacting with Bitcoin regularly, simply because you're artificially inflating people's net worth by saying everything is dollar denominated. But in reality, your dollar loses value every second because Bitcoin's getting more valuable, and the only thing you're really transacting on is Bitcoin. But for those of you that have dollar, like you have a 10-year span where spend all your dollars now, and then after that, they're going to be worth nothing. So you got to spend it real quick. Like, no, that I don't think necessarily is, I don't buy into that, simply because I think mathematically speaking, it's too disincentivizing to those who control the most amount of dollars, and those who control the most amount of dollars will try to do something to prevent their dollars from being worthless. I also would challenge and ask that if you believe at some point in the future, when the untangling is done, that we have a few different fiat currencies circling around, whether they're turned into stable coins and they're strictly digitized, or we still actually have some form of like paper money credit trail in that capacity. I'm not trying to be a shitcoiner, but like, do we not also give credence or believe that if some fiat currencies can exist alongside the Bitcoin ecosystem, that one or two of these other cryptographic projects that have tokens that people trade on today could very well be a part of this future ecosystem as well?
They can exist. They have a right to exist. I don't hate.
I'm sorry. That was
No. I mean that. I don't think that crypto projects shouldn't exist. I support people's right to make initial coin offerings and drop them on unsuspecting fools. That's fine. That doesn't bother me because I'm not purchasing those projects. But I think the problem is when you have people who are not being honest about their projects and who are misinforming the general public. And I would say most of the general public is misinformed about what these projects are, and they believe that their property will not be disenfranchised when in fact it will. It'll be stolen from them. It'll be inflated away. It'll be at the behest and will of a couple of venture capitalists who just don't care about you. And you're replacing a trust system with a legacy trust system with another trust system that's in fact more fragile even than US dollars. It's very dangerous for retail investors. Now, I don't know whose job it is to, police that. The SEC is going to come and do their best, obviously. But I'm just saying, this is why I advocate Bitcoin only. It's because you just can't know. There's too much trust involved in these projects.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I really stress that I hope Bitcoiners aren't hoping for over-regulation from government entities in the space, because that goes against our ethos. Like cryptography is speech, and using cryptography should be protected by free speech rights. And if we are going to accept that and understand that, then we need to have folks like Alex and like that are, being sort of like a decentralized consumer protection team that are going out and saying, no, this had a 70% pre-mine, it's not permission, or it is permission, blah, 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 blah. And just being really honest about, it works both ways. Like if we want people to be able to do whatever they want, then people also need to be able to like talk fairly about these systems and not have it just be like, oh, you're just being a maximalist. It's like, no, I grokked it. I did the work. Like I used to think that stuff, and then I learned more, and now I don't. Not out of a place of ignorance, but out of like true understanding. So yeah, I know. I don't think alt things will ever go away. We'll always see more of them. Marketing teams will always find a way to recreate problems that central banking solved. Like trusted parties in economics are not a bad thing. In a lot of ways, like it's okay to go take out a loan. Like that's a necessary financial instrument for some people, and that's okay. But like use banks, use trusted things. Don't use these kind of mediocre smart contract platforms that are buggy, that can mess things up and have billions of dollars lost because of bad code. It's like, go to a bank and use it. Do I want banks to be materialized? Am I wearing a shirt that says Bitcoin because fuck banks? Yes. Crypto graffiti, shout out. Bitcoin versus the world. Shout out unlimited. but I do think that there's like a reality to reality, and a lot of these projects aren't going anywhere, and I guess I wish them well, but I think if where we're going, I think that there's no more upside than there is in Bitcoin, and there's no more dependability and reliability in a protocol than there is in Bitcoin. So I personally wouldn't ever suggest anyone at this point diversify. I think it's sort of a false economic narrative personally, but that's just my opinion. And I have diversified. I have had these coins before, but not in a very long time, and I don't recommend it at this point.
I love it. I think we're gonna have to come back, and the three of us are gonna have to do a panel on this. I think we're gonna have to make a new segment: shitcoin minimalism and Bitcoin maximalism. I think this was a very entertaining segment of Bitcoin Adjacent Equities. So thanks for coming out of the closet shitcoin wise, Q. What's that?
We
Sorry,
did
what?
not get a chance to really dive into that Riot Bitcoin chart. So sorry for those who actually were watching for that today.
Yeah, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we'll come back around to Riot for sure. Q, I just wanted to give you a chance to rebuttal, and then let's wrap this up so that we can actually dig into a segment of Meet the Plebs with Casey Carrillo and Mark Goodwin here.
Yes. I will be short and sweet. I absolutely agree that this ecosystem relies on one another to survive. We're not going to see the end of Bitcoin anytime in the near future, nor will we see the end of a new shitcoin project popping up. The next big shitcoin, this year's Doge, Shiba, or whatever other were the big winners last year. Sorry. Like new coins are going to pop up all the time. Ultimately, I still believe that the best course of action is continuing to dollar cost average and having a majority of it be Bitcoin. I always adhere to my McShane rule, as I like to call it, where my net worth is not measured in how much fiat I have, but how many Bitcoin I have. So regardless of the price of Bitcoin, as long as you're stacking sats, you're increasing your net worth overall. And I think that should ultimately be the way we look at things. That said, there's always opportunities to make money. For those of us that are really in this industry and in this sector, like we can take advantage of that, and we should. There are tons of resources. Feel free to hit. I think any of us are very responsive on Twitter about questions and stuff. All of you in the chat box, except for Jair, who just had a hissy fit. Like, feel free to hit us up. Like, we're always happy to dive deeper. I want to also highlight something that Michael Witter just said regarding Elon, and like ultimately like the pump and dumps, they're going to keep happening. They happen in stocks too. It will be interesting to see what the SEC and what centralized entities do to decentralized platforms like Bitcoin, because ultimately I think, unfortunately, those who are less versed in this sector clump the two together, and so we will have to have a lot of fighting this year, I think, to keep Bitcoin and crypto separate. And I think that will be the next big fight.
Was a Bitcoin. Yeah.